This next speaker is the Vice President of Operations Industrial Products at BASF. With 11 plus years, his key focus is upskilling, balancing mental health and empowerment, fostering belonging and trust in leadership, strategic cost and investment mindset. Current priorities are understanding the North American operation needs and ensuring long-term economic viability. Will you please help me welcome Mr. Falko Abels to the stage? I'm going to get that right.
I wanted to say thank you for setting up the agenda as you did, because I just learned the expectations, usually from my end, are pretty high on somebody who's on the stage, and they were high and they were fulfilled. So now you can get low expectations because it's very hard to follow the first speaker. So thanks for that, Paul. I'm here today and I'm trying to use also this tool to move forward, to give you, a little start of the day, talking about, what kind of skills do we see in people when we try to hire, what kind of skills do we want, and maybe what have we seen in the past as well. We all have experienced certain things, and I'd like to start us off with a personal story. Okay, so it's called The Interview. What do you see? To me, what I see on this slide is that's the chemical industry 30 years ago. Well, as a matter of fact, it isn't. That's 11 years ago. 11 years ago, when I went to BASF for my first interview, and I was trying to get hired, the expectation on a chemist getting into BASF was you dress up in the best suit that you have, you wear the best tie that you have, and you better convey the message that you know what hierarchical management is, what skills that you already developed, how good your PhD is, and then you're going to get into the best chemical company. That was the attitude. All my peers, everybody, was expecting to see a room full of people dressed up like this, and also everybody expected the same from you. Now, when you click on the next slide, unfortunately, that wasn't me. So, when you now look at the picture, you might see yourself also thinking about some situations that you have seen yourself where, somebody enters the room and you ask yourself, first 7 seconds count, that. Is that really what I'm looking for? So, that's not me, that's a random picture, but it's getting pretty close. So probably I came across arrogant, he knows it all, way too modern. You could put positive attributes to that. You could say, maybe agile, somebody who wants to help, encouraging, but that was not the vibe that I was getting. So I'll give you the end of the story at the end of the presentation, but I just want you to think about similar situations that you might have had and you also have today when you think about what do I need, whom do I want to hire, what do I need for my workforce moving forward, and then we get back to that story at the end of the presentation, okay? So let's move on. What we'll try to do is I'll try to give you not a history lesson, but I'll try to convince you, if you aren't convinced already by yourself, that of course we're always going through changing times. Never was there one particular time where everybody dressed up the same, had the same attitude towards the industry that he or she was working for. But then we're talking about the automation paradox a bit later, and then we're getting into the question before we go to the panel, like, okay, what is it that we really need to achieve? So you see, I also put up some pictures. I tried to make sure that, it wasn't only me. So also, very early, folks look different, right? Like Faraday, Curie, they definitely look different than any chemist that I've experienced during my time. There were a couple of industrial revolutions for sure. You see the dates here. So we had changes. We had to adapt. There was steam, electricity coming into play. And at a certain point in time, when we click to the next slide, latest in the 1950s, with computing, the way how we looked into our data and how we could work on empirical stuff changed tremendously. And this also helped us quite a lot to become faster and faster in developing things. Let's see if this one works. Beautiful. So, right in time, Paul, when I talk about modern days and, innovation and, today, Internet of Things, handheld devices, it's everywhere, right? We just learned from David that basically we're all distracted the whole time because we have all those tools. And I just tried to put away my phone while he was telling me that. And because it was on the table. And to add to the safety moment, I think he had it on there, and you heard from Paul that I'm, trying to work on mental health as well for my workforce. The point that David didn't mention specifically, but hopefully you all know, the problem with the attention span decreasing over the years is not only that you don't focus too good anymore, but your brain still tries to do it. So if I put my smartphone here, my brain constantly has to say, don't look there. It could wait, but don't look there. It's tasked, and it's consuming energy. So one or the other in the room, I personally can say I did a couple of times, might have experienced a bit more down in the evening than 20 years ago after a workday. Could this be? The fact is, you read this in many studies, it's just because you have to make sure that you get rid of all those distractions. Although you're trying to do it, your brain still has to do the work all the time. So that's just an add-on to it. Sorry for the sidestep. Well, what I wanted to show you, and I think the mic is getting louder and louder, or I'm using two, I'm sorry for that, is that we're of course going through ever-changing times all the time. And when you think about it, I think many of you might have seen that example before. There were times in which people were dealing with fibers. They had to understand how the paint is getting into the fiber, how the fabric behaves when you pull it, right? I mean, to make a shirt wasn't easy all the time, 100 years ago. But then, at a certain point in time, there was automation coming into play, and now all of a sudden, it seems like people only had to understand how to push which button in order to make the fibers pull through a paint and make the shirt. So, different skill set. But the question is, do you really lose the first skill set that you had to have? I mean, do you really don't need to know anything about the fiber anymore, just because you now have to push a button in order to make a shirt? So, a little introduction to what BASF is doing, and I'm pretty sure all the companies here at this table is also doing a lot. At least every study shows you certain numbers. This one says 80%, and I think everybody's investing, trying to improve, trying to embrace technologies. Ruby is a good example of things that you can do in order to become better, and we all need to do this. BASF is doing a lot as well. I'm not reading all the bullet points because that's not an advertisement here, but we're trying to make sure that we leverage some of the things. And I think my colleagues here, they're going to show you later in one of the discussions what we do in turnarounds and in people development. But what I want to show with this slide, and with the next one especially, is let's make sure that we do it specifically for what we need. So in operations, what do you need? Anybody seen a plant that has been getting less and less procedures? Please raise your hand. Thought so. Okay. So, I mean, I like to read, don't get me wrong, but there's no way you're going to read all the procedures that you need. But, from a reliability perspective, liability perspective, you have to. It's impossible to know everything that is in there. You have to study 10 years. And I mean, how many years do we have, Gabe, in order to prepare our folks to get into our assets? Well, it's impossible, right? So there are new means to help us with that, and that's great. Capture all the data, ensure that if you ask a question, you get a very comprehensive answer, and you know that you have not missed out on the one or the other procedure that was lying around somewhere and nobody just told you about, because it's this indirect somehow knowledge that others have with them that you just learn by doing it, and not by reading. So it's one example, and we call it Plant GPT. It's one of those things that we use. And we try to, bring it into every plant as well, making sure that people are in a position to ask a question and get, the best possible answer in order to do the job right in the field and safe. I'll give you a second to look at the picture. It took me a while. So we discussed a bit of, we have changing times and there's a need to learn and there's so many things to embrace. But does it really work that way? I mean, do we just go full force into automation? Does it work that way, truly? Let me ask you one question. Look into the room and I ask you, who remembers the phone number of mom or grandma? Raise your hand. Ouch. Okay, so we are a very senior group. That's for sure. Thanks, Falko. I'm sorry, but I include me in this. So I can truly tell you that I include me in this because I'm now going to explain you why it is a problem that you can all remember this number, but I'm pretty sure if I had a different room with a different audience, this wouldn't be the case. Well, what you all did 1,000 of times was either this or even this, right? But you did it. But nowadays, it's automated. It is sometimes not even one push of a button, it's maybe call mom. Scream it into a room, somebody's going to pick up the phone, if it's Alexa or I don't know who it is. But you don't have to do anything anymore. What did that do to us? I can tell you what it did to me. I was the one that used a strategy of melodic rhythm, 341-960-835. That's, by the way, the number of my mom, don't call her now. I didn't give you the country code there. So it is a strategy that I developed in order to memorize patterns. that skill is no longer there. Why would it? I give you an even more disturbing example. Sorry that I have to do this. There's a good note at the end. But how do you become friends today? How do you express your gratitude? How do you express that you like something very much? It's all the same. It's one click. It's one click. It doesn't matter if you want to say a heart, or you want to say applause, or you want to say thumbs up. It's all the same. It's a click. How do you become friends? That's what I said earlier. Well, join a group. How do you apart from people or exit the group? How do you want to make sure that you don't get into discussion why you left the group? Well, just block them. That's what's happening. When you saw the picture earlier, I love the picture. It's very simple. So by doing this, we might lose some of the skills as well. Another question to the audience. How often have you waited for the automated response on the phone to give you all the options? You might have just pushed 2 because you know the answer is 2, right? You didn't wait for them to explain what 3 and 4 is. So what did you do? You showed no empathy. I mean, I'm sorry, why would you show empathy to a chatbot? But you showed no empathy. You didn't wait for the other to, express what they wanted to say. And that's what you see as well in real life. You don't see anybody anymore waiting for somebody to finish the sentence. I see myself doing that. That's crazy. Everything is so fast. There's no patience, nothing. But it is great that we have those automated responses, right? We all love it. It's faster, we get to our things faster, all our packages are faster in our place. We love the automation, but we should think about the implication of it. All right, trying to get back to the chemical industry. That's the wrong one. I have 2, see? I was distracted. Biggest one. So when you think about the chemical industry, of course, automation means you automate lots of processes. But if you automate too much, and I think some of my colleagues, we had a good discussion on that on the table already, talked about it, you might lose the underlying concepts of it. So, and I'm afraid if you automate so much that you lose the sense of what's going on in your pipes, well, how do you then further develop the automation? How do you help to improve if you don't accept and understand the underlying consequences? So we see a potential loss of expertise from my perspective if we were only to focus to get into a new world. And this is the only portion that I wanted to highlight today, and maybe getting into the panel discussion as well. Let's be careful what we advertise, because there's truly still a need for a skill set that is not solely attributed to modern technologies. This is like a bad and good slide, kind of, right? I mean, it's green and red. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's more than that, but maybe those are a couple of bullet points that you can relate to easily. I mean, the modern workforce going into our plants and our teams, they will definitely help us to improve. We will become faster and better at what we can do. We will embrace the new technologies because, everybody has naturally been grown in this environment. Although we don't like the fact that everybody's sitting with a smartphone in front of their face, well, but they should know better how to deal with some of the things than we do. And by we, I mean the senior group that remembers all the phone numbers. Right? So, just saying, there is an advantage to it. However, on the other end, we need to watch out because communication skills, maybe the face-to-face interaction, the way of how we interact with each other could tremendously change if we don't also convey some of the skills, translate some of the skills that have been built up over the years. It leads me into a couple of my last slides, I think 2 or 3, trying to make up some time. I don't know if I'm successful with that. But of course, we want to talk about how do you hire then in the end. I mean, find the right mix. I'm trying to get back to my first picture with the tie. I mean, what do you see? Is it truly a skills gap that you see? Is it somebody entering the room with the wrong attitude, maybe not the right skill set? Maybe he or she is bringing the right skill set, but we just feel it isn't right. I mean, we have the discussion. Sometimes you feel, nowadays they're coming in and they only want to play with an iPad. They don't know what an asset looks like. Well, maybe it looks like that, but don't underestimate the capability of everybody to have the attitude towards learning and to embrace it also something that we already know. So, to summarize key messages, I think let's embrace the generation that is out there to get into our assets and make sure that we benefit, but also make sure that we convey the message of only because you call it old school, it doesn't have to be bad. Right? make sure that we look at it from both perspectives. And last but not least, the last bullet point, be very intentional about what you automate and what you don't. I mean, there are certain things, if you start automating them, you might have to think about the skill set that you lose and the strategies that you need to develop in order to then, maintain that skill set. So let's just be mindful about that. So that's circling back to my first picture. I can tell you it wasn't smart of me to not go in without a tie. 3 years after I had been hired, spoiler, I was hired, I'm still in the company. Somebody who was sitting on the panel told me, the only reason why we discussed not hiring you is because you didn't wear a tie. Why the hell? I said, well, first of all, I was offended. It's like, how can you say that? Is it really the only reason? He said, yes, because you were so naive to think that you could do this. The company wasn't there. I mean, nowadays every CEO is you don't see a CEO wearing a tie, or at least many of them, but it wasn't the time. And it was not respectful of me to not go in without a tie. At least I can tell you, I know how to do the tie on, and I should know and learn when to apply it. Not trying to become like old school and trying to, please everybody, but you should understand that you risk yourself at coming across differently than what you actually can achieve. And some of our younger talents, and I'm pretty sure there are many out there, they can do more than what we think they can. And only because they have been grown up as digital natives, that doesn't mean that they like to get their hands dirty and like to get to work on a pump or a valve. I think there's lots of talent out there, and let's just make sure we stay open and not biased. And by that, I'd like to thank you for your attention today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Falko. Appreciate it. How many of y'all know your own phone numbers? How many times you dial that? All right, so one sec. We do have a panel coming up. Any questions for Falko real quick from the audience? Anybody? Because we will have a discussion. Yes?
Hi, I'm Alex. So just a quick question. So we keep talking about automation. But some of the assets, especially in this area, are since the 50s, the 60s. How can we automate something like this? We have some units that are new, and when they're new, we put the best and the greatest technology that out there, but the old assets, I'm not sure how can we automate any of that assets, to be fair. It's kind of challenging for us.
Yeah, I hear you. Thanks for the question. And of course, that's part of the issue from my perspective. We sometimes talk about automation, digitalization as if we were ready to implement whatever it is, just give me the CapEx, right? Or just increase my costs and mobility there. That's of course not the case. But I truly believe that there are always opportunities to do a little thing here and there. I mean, I have assets myself. I can tell you, there's just no way you can automate that. Of course, nowadays, some of our investments in South China, there are plants that are, they're starting out with the push of a button, and you stop them with the push of, well, that's easy, push of a button, stop, but startup, good startup, inspect product, that's not something. You can do this if you build it from scratch, I agree. But some of the lines, some of the things, if you're upgrading your equipment, at least you could partially start to automate that, automate sequences, or make sure that safety behavior is better, because you have like a good stop button. A stop button that is truly saving you, stopping you safely, and not just stopping and then creating lots of work. So I think there are needs, but thanks for the comment. You're absolutely right. It requires lots of upfront investment in order to get your asset into the state where you then fully can automate. And digitalization means different things to different people, but automation to me at least means that you have less manual work. And then I said, less manual work shouldn't come with less thinking about the processes that are going on. That was the critical piece that I mentioned. Thank you.